What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing you another video. Today I'm bringing you a video on Lupinranger versus Power Ranger Episode 1, which is pretty cool to think now that we're into Lupinranger versus Power Ranger. Lupinranger's team, the season's actually called Kaito Sentai Lupinranger versus Kisatsu Sentai Power Ranger, but I decided to shorten it, and that's how I'm going to refer to it in most episodes. So if you're wondering why am I calling it the shortened version rather than the extended version, it's just because it's easier for me. Also, if you look online, in many cases they'll have Power Ranger written as Pat Ranger. I personally am just going to call it Power Ranger because that's how I like it. So if you're wondering why I call them the Power Rangers or something else, the reason is because that's how I like to say it. And, you know, you can say it any way you want. Pat Rangers is fine too, but that's just my opinion. And the way that they write it online in several cases is Power Ranger. So, you know, understand from my perspective where I'm getting at. So anyway, moving on to the actual episode itself, I thought it was pretty decent. For those of you that may not have liked it, you have to keep in mind it's the first episode of a season, so give it some time. Don't just say right away, I don't want to watch this. It's still too early to really say whether or not the show is bad or good. Personally, so far, I thought it was decent. I want to see where they're going to go with it. I want it to be really good, of course, and that's always the goal. Q Ranger, the previous season, you know, when I started off, I wasn't sure what I was going to feel about it, but you know what? It turned out to be a really great season, and I was really excited for that one. So, you never know. This was a season that I was not really certain whether or not I was going to like it or not. And personally, I thought the first episode was pretty decent, so I definitely want to see where they're going to go from here. So let's move on to the actual episode itself. I have a lot to talk about because this is the first episode, so character introductions, story, plot introductions, all sorts of stuff is important here. So I want to get started because I'm sure many of you guys want to hear from me. So the episode starts off with us seeing a casino ring happening where there's this person who's playing at a casino wheel. He is trying to win a bet and he loses. So what ends up happening is we end up seeing this character who has a mustache which looks fake, and he basically laughs as the guy is dragged off because he can't pay his debt at the casino. So then at this point what ends up happening is that the Lupinrangers jump out of a window and appear before the casino members. They attack and they cause trouble, and also we end up seeing the Ganglers appear. Now the Ganglers are actually what the enemies are. That's what their group is called. And what I wanted to mention is that then eventually the Lupin Red, who we're going to know his name in a little bit, but he ends up throwing a card, and it's going to be his thing in a number of episodes, I'm sure. He throws his card and it releases the figure that was laughing before, his human form, from being his human form to being a monster form, which his monster form, they don't actually refer to it in the show, but the name of it, if you're wondering what it is Rureta Giro, which makes sense because like Rureta sounds like roulette, because it's like a roulette wheel. That's what it was. So that's interesting. So what's also important to remember is that each of these Gangler members, it seems like they're going to have human forms, but they're also going to have monster forms, and they're going to have saves. These saves will have their Lupin item. Now that's something that we'll get into towards like later into this episode, but those items have to do with what they're able to accomplish and everything like that. So what ends up happening from here is that the Lupinrangers begin to attack. They're wearing their masquerade uniforms. They do all sorts of slow motion fighting sequences. And then we see the safe open where Lupin Red ends up taking out the Lupin Collection item, which is this box. So that's the item that the monster was using, and we end up learning that this item allowed the monster to manipulate the game so that the people who would play the game would always lose. So in other words, he could win, they could do whatever they wanted, and they would always go bankrupt, which is not good, but smart for the Lupinrangers. So then from here we end up seeing the GSPO, which is the Global Space Police, I believe, or actually was his, I believe it's right. I'm trying to remember now what they're actually referring to themselves as, something like that. But anyway, it is interesting to note. So what does end up happening from here is that the Power Rangers or the global police appear, and they try to arrest the Lupinrangers after they end up destroying Ruretta. And what ends up happening is that Lupin Red summons his his dial fighter, which is his mecha for the season, which is the red dial fighter. And when he summons it, the Lupinrangers shoot out their versus changer guns and get a rope or a harness attached on to the Lupin Red's mecha, and then they escape. At that point, the Power Rangers are annoyed, and then the episode continues to the next day, where we end up seeing that people around the world are watching videos of the Lupinrangers and are really happy because they think the Lupinrangers are really cool. And, they're referred to as thieves, and yet they're seen as good guys in a way. So that's interesting, because, of course, people were thinking from the start, thieves. The whole idea of thieves seems like a not so good thing. Why would you trust thieves? But at the same time, the way that they act as thieves is not bad. That's the thing that's always cool about these kind of scenarios. Like, that's why when it came to pirates, like, with Gokaiger, people were thinking pirates aren't necessarily good, but the way that they made them work made it out like these were kind of good pirates, but pirates that still felt like they're pirates. They're genuine. And these are thieves, but they're thieves in a sense where they're likable. They're not just evil. People think when they hear thieves sounds a little bit more evil or dark. They're not evil or dark. They just steal stuff because it's stuff for their collection, which is interesting. We'll get into that more, but I like the idea of that. It should be interesting to see what they'll do with that. So then from there, what ends up happening is that we end up seeing we actually get to meet Lupin Red, who is, I'm trying to actually find his name, Yano Kairi. So that is cool. We actually get to know his name finally. So Kairi is Lupin Red. Then we end up seeing Asuka Kichiro, who is Patoranger Ichigo, and he is reading a newspaper and is upset because people around him are basically saying, the global police weren't able to deal with the monster, but the thieves were. So I guess we can trust the thieves more than we can trust the police, which, sounds pretty terrible because it's true. The fact that the police weren't able to get to the enemies first said something. It says, they're not as quick and they're not as efficient and they're not doing their jobs right, which is important. So I actually find that pretty interesting to note, of course. So what does end up happening from here is that we end up seeing Kairi talk to Kichiro because they're actually in the same place, but they don't know each other at first. That's what's important here. And what happens is that Kichiro is going to throw a newspaper into the wastebasket, but the thing is that it's a distance away and he's going to throw it from a distance, but Kairi basically tells Kichiro, don't do it, because you're going to fail, and it's not going to go in. So what happens is that Kichiro tries, doesn't go in, so he has to go pick it up and put it away. And there's just this he's kind of smarky, and, he likes to cause trouble, Kairi, and just in terms of the Lupinrangers seem like they like to cause a little bit of trouble. So all that's happening, we then end up seeing Kagura, which is the butler character for the season. He's kind of like their mentor or ally for the season. We don't really know what he'll actually be. He could be their mentor, but he is something that's supposed to be important, it does seem. So he ends up appearing with a limo, and Kairi and Kagura are going to talk to each other, or Kogura are going to talk to each other inside the limo. So then we end up seeing that the Lupinrangers work in a bistro. The bistro is called Bistro Juror, I think it is. And Bistro Juror, Jurer. So what ends up happening is we end up meeting the other two members of the Lupinrangers. The two members are called Hayami Umika, which is Lupin Yellow, and Yomachi Toma, or Toma. So Toma and Yumika. So those are the two names. And the reason why I'm saying those names is just because I'm also trying to make sure that I know these names. Because again, eventually, if you watch this season, you're going to want to know the names of each of the characters. And that's what's good. So what does end up happening from here is that we end up seeing Umika actually catch a glass that falls, and she seems like she has good reflexes because they've been doing all sorts of, you know, thievery and having to deal with different enemies and crimes and all that kind of stuff several times over. So it's kind of interesting to see that kind of aspect. And I like the bistro idea. That's something that's cool. It's kind of cool because the season has a lot of things that I kind of see in the Kamen Rider season that's going on right now, which is like the sister show in a way. So it's kind of cool that they are really looking to match things in a way. As far as certain aspects of the season, like bistros, you know, they had a cafe in Kamen Rider. But getting back to Sentai, we see all this. We then end up seeing that, you know, Umika's not happy because Toma is a jerk and Kairi's unreliable because of the fact that Toma, you know, tries to be annoying about how he can cook, but like Umika can't, but she can serve. And Kairi is not at work. And the thing is that she doesn't trust him and feels that he's unreliable. So that's all brought up. Then we end up meeting the Patorangers, and they are in the Global Police Tactical Unit Operation Room, which is their headquarter operation room. We end up meeting them. For starters, we meet Myojin Tsukasa, and she is Powerran Sango, which is the pink Power Ranger, or Pat Ranger. And we also meet Hikawa Sakuya, who is the rookie of the team, it seems. So he is the new guy, and he kind of looks up to everyone. So we now know the Power Rangers, which are Tsukasa and Sakuya. So those are the two members. And then we end up meeting the commissioner, or the leader for the team, or basically the mentor, which is Commissioner Hilltop. And he's interesting because he's an African-American actor who, I think he's German. I forget if that's right, but I believe he's supposed to be German. And he's been in a number of other Japanese shows before, so that's cool. I actually don't mind that at all. I like that he's going to be this black actor that's playing this role, and he seems to know Japanese fairly well. And he's a funny actor. I mean, he's pretty laid back and kind of silly. He seems similar to Sho from the previous season of Uchu Sentai Q Ranger, you know, that season. Very similar, just kind of laid back and goofy, and likes to be silly at times. I kind of like him. I like his character. So we also meet the robot assistant, which is called Jim Carter. And Jim Carter is based off of a character from a movie, if you know. I think it's from Rush Hour, so that's something that's interesting that they're kind of referencing. We also find out that Sakuya thinks that the thieves are good because they managed to defeat the monsters. And the thing is that Kajiro comes in and gets annoyed. And the reason why is because apparently those thieves were, not the thieves, the monsters were using their item to make people have to pay for their casino debts, which they weren't able to pay for. And then if they couldn't pay, they would have their organs harvested, which is pretty screwed up and pretty crazy. But I like the idea that it sounds pretty insane, and like, you know, it wasn't ever shown, but it is an interesting idea to see and hear about. So, and I'm not saying like I love that aspect of it, but I think it's kind of an interesting thing for them to go for. You know, it's different. So that is all brought up. We then end up seeing Kairi giving the Lupin collection item to Kagura, and we end up learning about how there was this phantom thief from over 100 years ago that was trying to collect all these items for the Lupin collection, and he was called Arsene Lupin, and he did this quietly and managed to collect several treasures. We end up also seeing the Lupin collection, which has mysterious powers, all those items. So if the Lupin Rangers have them, that's one thing, but if the Ganglers have them, that could be really bad. What's also cool about the Lupin collection is that a lot of the items that we actually see in the Lupin collection are actually past items used in previous seasons of Sentai. So we see items from Go Busters, from Q Ranger, from Gekyu Ranger, from several different seasons are actually featured there. We see stuff from Gokaiger, we see stuff from all sorts of cool seasons. I actually love that a lot. But it's really neat. Like, some of them are transformation items, some of them are parts of mechas. So, you know, there's just a lot of stuff going on that they kind of incorporated, and I feel like that's kind of cool that they did that. And I wonder if that will be something that we'll see some of those items later on. or if those kind of give you a hint as to whether or not certain characters may be showing up in the future, that could be cool too. More likely than not, those would happen in specials, not necessarily in regular episodes, but we'll see. It could happen. That has happened before, because if you've watched Zyuohger, that did happen with Gokaiger, so you never know. What does end up happening from here is that we end up seeing the Ganglers having a feast. They're talking. We end up meeting the leader of the Ganglers, which is Degranio Yabun, and he is interesting because many people were wondering what he's supposed to be based off of and what the three members are, because there's Degranio. Then we also end up finding out that Degranio is 999 years old, and we also meet Goshu Ru Amidu, who will be called Goshu, and Destroya Mazio, or Destroya, which are the two generals for his for the Ganglers. So that's cool. And the thing is that each of them are actually based off of dinosaurs and guns or military weapons, which is kind of a cool thing. Like, for example, Destroya is based off of I forget what kind. It's a certain type of dinosaur and a grenade, and I believe that Degranio is based off of a T-Rex and a machine gun or a shotgun or something like that. Or maybe it's a Gatling gun. I actually don't remember now. I forget what Goshu is based off of. I know she's based off of some sort of like bird dinosaur of some sort. And I forget what kind of gun or machine that she's based on, but it's interesting that the Ganglers have some sort of connection to like dinosaurs and weapons. Now I don't know if that's true for all of them, but it is an interesting aspect. What we also learn is that the Ganglers formed 500 years ago, and Degranio made them form. We also learned that Degranio is looking for a successor, and the way that someone can become a successor is if they manage to take control of the human world. That allows them the ability to be a successor. So that's interesting. We also get to hear about the new target following this, because what happens is that it then switches to Kairi and Kagura, or Kagura, back in the limo, where Kagura gives Kairi their next mission, which is this new enemy called Garado Nago, who is a monster involved in a lot of jewel theft, where he'll steal jewels and then he'll use his Lupin collection item to use to make flames and destroy jewelry shops. So that's something that's interesting. So then from there, what happens is that Kairi agrees that he'll go and do that, and he says, we made a promise. Now, I don't know what that promise is, and that's the thing that I'm going to ask you guys. I wonder what that is, We don't know what the promise is. It could just be something that they're always going to stay together. They're always going to be true to each other. It could be something else. There might be more to that promise than we know. It might be really significant. It could be very simple, but I wonder. The other thing, what ends up happening is that Kairi appears at the bistro. He tries to make this excuse that there's this private, reservation that's happening later that day, and so they have to close the shop, so they give people something and then they can go. And then the Lupinrangers find out that they have to go on this mission, so they end up going to deal with Garado, which we end up seeing them appear in this building where there are red lasers and they have to dodge them, and eventually they end up appearing in this air shaft where there's this spider, and Umika's laughing a little bit, and Toma's trying to stop her from laughing, and eventually, because she's laughing and the Ganglers can hear it, the Ganglers' foot soldiers or troops, which by the way they're called, or grunts, are called Portaman, and they end up shooting at the air shaft. So at that point, the Lupinrangers have to fight. They're wearing their masquerade outfits. They end up fighting the Portaman and also Garado. They destroy a lot of the Portaman, and eventually what ends up happening is that Toma and Umika are captured and are left in a state where they could get killed, because what happens is that Garado has like 4 arms, and he also can shoot flames. So he's pretty crazy, and it's because he has his Lupin collection item, which is a lighter. So that's interesting. So what we also end up seeing from here is that eventually Kyrie does figure out a strategy to get his friends back, because he made a promise to them, and that is he ends up shooting up the ceiling and destroying it, and the ceiling caves in on his two members, his teammates, but they end up creating a hole in the ground and escaping the attack of the ceiling falling in. And what ends up happening is that they appear before Kyrie, and Nagrata is confused because he's like, how could this be? And he learns, and it's just a crazy moment. So at that point, the Lupinrangers transform, which their transformation sequence and their roll call is really cool. I like their roll call a lot. I think that it's a really neat design. I like how they look in general. I think it's a pretty cool setup with what they did there. So then following this, we also get to see, and this is something that I don't think I mentioned before, there is a moment where Jim Carter has this moment where he receives a signal that the ganglers are attacking, and so they have to go and deal with that. We also see that Hilltop appears with a suitcase holding what most likely might be the Versus Changers and their trigger machines, which will allow them to transform into Patorangers. So that's interesting. Again, that means that initially the Lupinrangers were the only ones that actually had the Versus Changers. And it makes sense because of how the story works, because the thing is that it's something that the Versus Changers were made for the Lupinrangers and for the Lupin collection in general. So it's interesting to see how that works. What does end up happening from here eventually is that the Lupinrangers do end up getting out of the building. They have a lot of fighting moments. We actually get to see the Lupinrangers sidearm or basic weapon, which is their sword weapon for the season, which is the Lupin sword, and they use that, and it's a cool device. They end up attacking Garado and doing lots of different cool attacks against him. Eventually the Patorangers do appear. They use their Versus Changers, which the Lupinrangers are really surprised to see, because they didn't realize that anyone else would have them, because they think like these were just meant for them and they were made for them. So like, where would anyone get these? That's the interesting question that people have been wondering. And I actually have there's actually a theory going online that supposedly might be true, because it's a rumor, but it actually sounds like it's legit. Like people have actually read into it, and it sounds like it could be a thing. But following this, we end up seeing the Patorangers transform, and the episode ends there. Now, the thing is regarding theories. The theory is that Hilltop might have actually been the Phantom Thief, Arsène Lupin. That is the rumor. It's not confirmed, but supposedly that might be the case. He may actually be Arsène Lupin, which would be kind of cool and would lead to some interesting things. He actually might actually be the sixth member for the team, for all we know. We don't know if that's true, but I think that that's an interesting idea, the fact that he could be Arsène Lupin, and that could be another connection. Because again, there's obviously this aspect of them having some connections somehow. We don't know the whole story about it, but there's something there, and I actually kind of wonder about that myself, what that will lead to. I also want to know what that promise is that the Lupinrangers made to each other. It could just be that they'll always stay together, and that's fine too. But I am wondering, there could be more to it. I also want to know more about Kagura, or Kagura, or whatever, because he seems pretty interesting, the butler character. I want to learn more about him, because he's very mysterious in this episode. I didn't go into all the details that he brought up, but let's just say this much. He's pretty much a quiet character that probably knows a lot more than we know so far, and will be very interesting to learn more about over time. I just in general can't wait to see where this show will go. It's the first episode, so if you guys didn't enjoy it, that's fine, but don't give up on the season right away. Give it some time. If you don't like it, that's fine, and it's up to you what you choose to do. Personally, for me, I definitely want to see where they're going to go with this. I don't want to give up on it right now. This first episode makes me hopeful that it'll actually be pretty good, in my opinion. And again, that's my opinion. If you didn't like it and you thought this was bad, that's fine. I appreciate that opinion. To me, I liked it, and I want to see where they're going to go with it. I wouldn't say that it's as good right now as Q-Ranger, let's just say, but I wouldn't say it's bad. I don't dislike it, but I don't want to commit to anything yet. Because, it could turn out to be much worse later on. It could be a really bad season, but I don't want to say that yet. I want to hope for good things. We also see in the previews, by the way, Patoranger Ugo, which is the combination of the 3 Power Rangers, and also Lupinranger will be in the next episode, which is cool. Lupinranger is the main mecha for the Lupinrangers. Obviously, Patoranger will have to wait and see when that comes, but that's cool. Or Patoranger. I actually don't remember how they're referring to it. They are referring to it as Pat Kaiser. No, that's right, Pat Kaiser. So that is interesting to see. I love to know your opinions, though. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Again, I know this video was long. It's because it's introductions, first episode, new characters. Next episode will be much shorter because I won't be going into as much story and background. Now it will just be like we're going full tilt into the story, and we won't have to deal with all the minor minutia, less important stuff, you know. Now we're into the real meat. Now we're into like the story, and everything else is like set up and you guys know stuff. So keep that in mind. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 1, and goodbye, guys.